Hi, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
I am so excited to dive into my questions. And my first one is all about little Priya. Can you tell me more about her, what she was like, and what she dreamed about?
I love this question, first of all. It really, really made me think about little Priya, and it brought back some really fond memories, but also some maybe not so fond memories as well. I think when you reflect back on who you were as a little one, it's also really exciting to kind of see how far you've come. But I guess if I had to describe little Priya, I would say that she was just like a mix of contradictions. I think she was confident, loud, audacious, super, super bold, but in the same vein, I think she was also like so deeply unsure of herself and really self-conscious actually in her own skin. I think like I was trying so hard to stand out when I was little and then also trying so hard to fit in. And I'm sure many people kind of feel that tension. Younger Priya was also the youngest of three. So I have two older siblings who like I idolize still, but I think when I was little, they were like my own personal celebrities. And I think I just constantly wanted to be older than I actually was. So I feel like I was always kind of chasing milestones and not really living in the present time or really trying to prove to people that I could keep up. Little Priya was also, spread super thin. She had a million activities. I was on a competitive volleyball team, a soccer team, student council. I starred in Broadway plays. I think I like simultaneously dreamed of being a CEO, a lawyer, and then also being like a famous singer, all at once. And so that was also kind of this interesting tension, to deal with. But I think all of those tensions have actually shaped a lot of who I am today. As I was reflecting back, I'm like, oh, I kind of am still very, very similar to little Priya in many of those ways, but I think a lot more confident, which is nice.
Oh, that was such a wonderful description. And it was this beautifully articulated tension that I definitely relate to. And I also really relate to wanting to be older and reconnecting back to presence. So that was really beautiful.
Thank you. It's funny.
Given
I was going to say, now I don't want to be older. Now I'm like, I'm going to slow down a little bit. So yeah, it's funny, funny how life works.
truly, give us a glimpse of the Priya who lived in multiple countries. What are a couple words to describe you from each of these chapters?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Priya who lived in multiple countries sort of like unlocked a new like spark in little Priya. I think, after university, I realized that I was trying so hard to fit in, but I didn't really want to fit into my surroundings. And I actually had the privilege of spending my last semester of college abroad in Singapore. And I think when I was in Singapore for the first time, I felt like I had found my people. And what's so funny about that is most of my friends in Singapore were actually Canadians and Americans from like similar schools. But I think there's something really magical about when you take people out of their environment and you put them into like uncomfortable new places, what kind of energy that brings from them. And so coming back from Singapore, I realized I wanted to kind of keep that energy as much as possible. So I really just started to look for as many jobs as possible as I could internationally. And I was lucky enough to land in Ireland in my first gig. And I genuinely would say, I know you asked for just a couple of words, but I think international Priya or like the Priya that lived in multiple cities honestly just like taught me that I can do hard things. I think that moving is so hard, making new friends, finding a new apartment, building a routine, getting a bank account, like visas and immigration. It's just a massive mental load. And I think that I sort of like had to push myself a lot outside of my comfort zone to realize that I was actually quite comfortable outside of my comfort zone, which is great.
That is so relatable once again. I am from Singapore, and it was so wonderful to hear you have such a great experience there. And I have only made the move visa wise from Singapore to the States, but making it across all of these places, the mental load is definitely something that I'm still recovering from. And so much of my pursuit of my wellness tools have been in response to recovering from that. And I'm really excited to chat more about that with you once we get to some of those questions.
Yeah, of course. I feel like I need all the wellness tips from you. I'm like my nervous system's still recovering from trying to get my green card. So excited
Yeah,
about it.
yeah. And no, you've definitely done incredible hard things, and I'm really excited to dive into some of those. So you've been a two-time chief of staff to an iconic leader. Tell me about transitioning from client solutions management to your first chief of staff role. How did you make that leap?
That's a great question. So if I had to describe making that leap, it really does feel surreal now that I look back because it was quite the leap. But I do think it was just a mix of being both incredibly lucky and then also actually unintentionally and maybe intentionally making my own luck. So first, I think like it started with me like seeing my dreams up close and personal. I was working at Facebook. I was 6 months into my role, and I was in Ireland, and one of our really kind of like big Facebook execs was visiting Ireland. And because she was visiting, she decided that she wanted to put on this like big client dinner where we invited some of our top small business client customers that, were scaling on our platform, seeing a bunch of success. And through that, I actually got the opportunity to take part in the roundtable with one of my customers. And again, I was like 6 months into this role. I think I was like early 20s, just really, really young. My manager was actually brought alongside me to kind of shepherd me through this kind of surreal experience. And in the lead up of her coming to Dublin, I saw this like incredible team that was surrounding this executive, the chief of staff, her EA, her comms team, just like all of these people behind the scenes that were really smart and honestly just really making sure that this executive was set up to shine. And after one of my meetings with her team, my boss looked at me and she was like, I think one day you'd be really, really good at that job. And it kind of just lit a spark in me because I knew that like my North Star ever since I was little was that, I wanted to be a leader of a large organization. I struggled to kind of figure out what my path looked like if I just stayed in sales. And so having my boss say to me in that moment, like, there's this chief of staff role and you could actually be really great at it. It was the first step where I kind of saw myself getting closer to my North Star. And it really just sparked something in me. And I decided to just kind of like fixate on that for a couple of years and really figure out how I could make, my own luck and really figure out how to get there. And like concretely, that meant, researching the role a ton, cold messaging every chief of staff across the company that I had no business talking to at that stage in my career, but many of whom have now become friends of mine and who took chances on me and had great career conversations with me. And so I was just really curious and I knew that I was too young, I was too junior to really take on a chief of staff role at that time, but it didn't stop me from really trying to figure out how I could immerse myself in what the possibilities of that role could be. Um, and then I'd say like the making your own luck part came a little bit later. I was, a couple years into my sales career. I was doing well and I had the opportunity to have like a skip level, almost like a skip level with a really senior vice president that was visiting, and he led our entire small business team. And in our meeting, he asked me just about my career and where I saw myself, and I used that as an opportunity to say to him that I wanted to be a chief of staff one day. And by that point, it wasn't just I want to be a chief of staff, but I had done so much research that I could be really concrete with him on the type of chief of staff I saw myself being and why I felt like that got me closer to my North Star. And then flash forward 2 years later, I was not on that team anymore. I wasn't even working in the same reporting line as that VP. And I got an email out of the blue. from him, saying, "Hey, I remember our conversation 2 years ago. You mentioned that you wanted to be a chief of staff. There's this amazing leader who's hiring her first chief of staff. And this is really one of the first chief of staff roles on the tech side of Facebook. Do you want an intro?" And I said yes. And that was, my in. And I think the rest is kind of history. So yeah, I think it was a lot of people taking chances on me, and I'm so grateful for those people. But I also feel like I worked really hard to be ready when the opportunity came so that I could kind of use those chances to my benefit.
That's so incredible. Be ready when the luck happens, as they say, which I absolutely love. And what I heard through what you shared was that you were prepared and incredibly relentless in your self-advocacy. Can you speak more to what you learned about self-advocacy during this process?
Yeah, I mean, even going back to just like making your own luck, I think like one thing that's just worth calling out that I do a lot, and I almost get like made fun of by my friends for this, but like I will talk about my dreams and my goals and my ambitions with anyone who will listen. You could be someone who I've just met, who I like hit it off with, and all of a sudden we're like manifesting our dreams together, to, my parents, to just like anyone that I think might listen, but also might be someone down the line that I could learn from or that could help me. And so it's really funny because even now, when I think about like what are my dreams, what are my ambitions, they're just so different than they were 5 to 10 years ago. And you can never really stop um, putting your dreams out there because they evolve, right? So I think that's kind of the first piece. Like as part of self advocacy, you kind of just need to like trust yourself and be able to communicate the things that you want, and articulate them pretty clearly to the outside world. And so I'd say that's like one piece. The other thing on self advocacy that I just like think is really important to call out is I'm not very good at self advocacy. I've gotten better, but we talked about these childhood tensions of like being someone that's like so confident on the outside, but part of that is sort of like masking sometimes a lot of like lack of self-confidence on the inside. And so I found that like something that was really interesting for me is that like all throughout my career, I've taken really bold moves and I've put myself in these really incredible rooms. But when I get in those rooms, I can sometimes sabotage myself. And there's like what's the like the duck that like looks calm, cool and collected on the surface, but like is literally pedaling so hard underneath the surface. And it's funny because that type of mentality got me through the first 10 years of my career. It was almost like a fear-based success model. Like take on the biggest, boldest opportunities you possibly can. And don't worry about all of the like negative self-talk and lack of confidence behind the scene because you'll figure it out. And it got me to where I am today, but like honestly, it really shot my nervous system. Like I don't think I spent enough time really asking myself how I could, be a better advocate for myself and how to like gain more confidence in myself. And so I think now self advocacy for me has really been about like being very specific about the people I surround myself with. And finding people who sometimes see the light in me before I see it, and not just like taking the compliment, but trying to understand the compliment, and like internalize the compliment. And I think a lot of that work comes down to like also just sort of starting to appreciate your strengths and not taking your strengths for granted. I think a lot of the times people would say to me, "You're a great communicator. You should like do this, you should do that." And I'd be like, "Yeah, but like everyone's good at that." Or like, "That's just something I've always been good at. I'm just going to downplay this." And I think it's both been for me surrounding myself with amazing people who see the light in me, but then when they shine that light, I need to kind of really ask myself, like, what makes that so much brighter than everyone else? And how do I continue to harness that light that people see in me? So anyways, it's a work in progress. I'm not there yet, but I will say that like a big chunk of my career was spent looking very self-confident on the outside, but like really struggling with that on the inside. And that's not great for your nervous system in the long term.
Yeah, and so much of what you shared Firstly, thank you so much for speaking to that experience because there were so many moments, even just last year when I was, um, yeah, making a bold move and um, attempting to iron out what masking versus authenticity meant, and that it was okay for me to show up with my authentic strengths, but different facets of those strengths in different rooms. And a lot of that journey involved for a certain period of time thinking that and forgetting that I even had these strengths as you shared, and not being able to hold, as you shared, what others saw in me and deflecting it back, or just like dropping it or acting really like frazzled or diminishing or minimizing it. So thank you for speaking so candidly to that experience as not something that is the end of the journey, but is part of the journey and so intertwined, but something that we can intentionally see, be aware of, and then address with all of these tools that I'm so grateful that are available to us. And I think it's so meaningful to hear that you experience those things and reach those heights, which just feels so encouraging to me because I definitely felt like it felt like it was the end of the road, but of course it never is. So thank you for speaking to that.
Of course, of course. I mean, even just to build on that, I think like self-advocacy is such a funny concept because I think so many of us tie or almost like correlate self-advocacy with like external advocacy. If like other people are advocating for you, if you're getting recognition, then it's easier to advocate for yourself. And like you almost need to figure out how to advocate for yourself when no one is advocating for you, or like just like kind of like detach the identity piece from like accomplishments or people advocating for you, and actually just like in isolate asking yourself like what about myself am I like willing to almost like if I was looking at myself from the outside, like what would I see in myself, and what would I be willing to put my butt on the line for this person, and like almost going outside of yourself sometimes is really helpful.
Absolutely. And building on that idea, another question that came to me was, I am very much in the trenches and maybe emerging out of it of navigating the experience of when you are questioning your worth and not seeing your light because maybe your immediate surroundings are not shining that on you. So you must find the light within yourself, as you shared, to shine that back out. Um, I was curious, I wrote this phrase down, people are able to shine the light on others because they see it in themselves. Um, can you speak more to some of the people who saw that in you and reflected that to you, um, and how you now explore finding more of those people? Because, of course, it's such a critical skill to advocate for ourselves, as we've spoken to, but it's also an equally critical skill to surround ourselves with those people. And they may not always just be mentors, but just this like collection of people who can um, show us mirrors um, that make us self-aware both in our strengths and other. How have you gone about doing that intentionally?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. I think the first part of that question or the first thing I'll say is a lot of the work that I used to do on trying to like find people that could like see my strengths and people that could shine this really beautiful light on me, and just kind of like help me with that self-advocacy. I think for a long time, almost like 100% of the effort I put into finding those people was just like in my traditional workplace. And I think that is very deeply tied to like where I was in my life and the identity that I thought I was creating and the identity that I thought I wanted. And I realized, I think, like, as honestly, as I progressed in my career and got more and more senior, that I wasn't really feeling super happy. And I think a big part of that was because I tied 100% of my identity to work. And so if I wasn't getting the advocacy from people at work, or if I wasn't feeling super strong at work, or, all of a sudden, like something went wrong, again, like my nervous system just felt so shot. And I just felt like my identity was being put into question. And rather than recognizing that at the time, I would like just really like aggressively try to solve that problem of like getting more people at work to like me or finding more people at work that could like advocate for me or trying to prove myself to my boss or this or that. And I actually think that I had like a really good conversation with my husband where him and I just kind of sat down and we were just like, something's got to change. Like, I have the career coach and I have like, the therapist and we're talking about all these things. But like, I think what it really comes down to is like, I am so much more than work. And there are tons of people out there whose identity is predominantly work, and that is totally fine for those people. But I actually just don't think those are the people I look up to as much anymore. Like, I think I need to have more of an identity outside of work. A part of my identity is being a really good daughter, objectively, like, what does being good mean? But like, I don't know. I think like subjectively, I want to feel like I'm being a good daughter. I think being a great sister, being a great partner, being a really good friend. And so I think the hardest parts in my life, first and foremost, were when my entire identity was tied to something that wasn't actually reflective of the identity I wanted. And so I say that as a first step because I think that then becomes the framework for how you surround yourself with people. So once I realized that, I realized, okay, all of my quote unquote mentors or all of the people that are advocating for me are from work. Now that I'm realizing that that's not my only identity, how do I start making sure that I have like advocates and just like people that can see my light outside of work? And I started making more of an investment in like how I talk to my parents and how I show up for them, how I show up for my husband and how I show up for my friends. And I started just forming much deeper relationships with a lot of the people in my life. And I think part of that wasn't even that I had to actively try too hard to go seek it. It was actually always there. I just wasn't like intentional about what I did with it. So those are like two concrete things that I think were like big aha moments. The third thing that I'll just say is like, I think it's really easy to find people who will advocate for you when you also start just advocating for other people. And you almost just like make it a part of your who you are, and it kind of just becomes a part of your identity. Like I find it so funny because like I think like giving people compliments sometimes, especially people that you're not super close to, some people are so protective over their compliments. They're very like, oh, I don't want to share that because I don't want to come off too strong or this or that. Like I am probably the least cool person because if someone does something interesting, I'm like, you're amazing. Like I love what you just did. I want to know everything about the thought process that went into what you just did. And I have no chill and I'm okay with that. Because I just why would I let a compliment why would I keep a compliment to myself? If I could tell someone how great they are, I want to do that. And so I've tried to just be like as generous as I possibly can with my own advocacy of other people as well. And I think that's really helped me find just like awesome people to surround myself with.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is such a beautiful message. And that is the premise of the podcast in that as you build this life toward your biggest career aspirations, who are you and how are you living a full life? And who are you and how are you bringing others along with you? So I think everything that you shared is absolutely in the spirit of the podcast. So thank you so much. And yeah, that deeply, deeply resonated with me.
I love that. No, I'm happy. I mean, I think even, you and I were talking before the podcast and like you're someone that I think embodies that so much. Like you were so generous with your compliments. And it's funny because when people, I think, even like when people are complimenting me, I've had to just start getting more comfortable with receiving those compliments. Like at first I'm like, oh, like, what do I do with this? And then I'm like, no, she's right. I am the things that she's complimenting me for are things I have done. And that's okay to be proud of your own accomplishments. I don't think that ever has to come at the um I don't think you ever have to like trade off humility for that. Like I do think you can be humble and also accept a compliment. So yeah, I think you embody that fully as well.
Thank you. And something that I shared with you was, again, that discomfort of deflecting a compliment versus really holding it and owning it. And something that has definitely helped me overcome the diminishing or the deflecting, because, self-awareness again is the strengths and the others, is celebrating the micro wins. And you had described making the feeling of success really tangible by not just focusing on the final outcome, but creating these micro wins for yourself along the way to build your confidence, which I love. Where did you first learn to do this, and how has it evolved along the way?
That's a great question. I think the like art of the micro wins came to me honestly out of like absolute necessity. Like I feel like I was almost hitting a rock bottom at a certain point in my career, which sounds really dramatic, but basically I had gone from being in a job that I was really good at. I was getting praised for being good at, and I was kind of hitting a point where I wasn't learning as much in that job anymore, and I didn't feel like it was getting me closer to my North Star. So I had to make kind of a tough decision, and I decided to pivot in a completely different way than I have in my career before. I went from being a lot more business centric to becoming a product manager. And I knew on paper it was the right thing for me to do. I knew that like it would get me close to my North Star. I had rationalized all of the reasons why this was the right career move. But I got into the job and the job humbled me so quickly. I realized super fast that I wasn't naturally very good at being a PM. And I just didn't like it. Like I was like in my day to day and I didn't really enjoy it. And probably those two things are correlated because we like to do things that we're good at. But I had to just completely rewire my brain and realize that like I like getting to the final outcome of being this amazing, incredible PM, one might not actually be the goal. Maybe it's okay that just having PM on my resume and doing the job for a year is like a stepping stone. And even though I might not be the best PM in the world and I might not get all the praise, like it's still getting me closer to my North Star. So like one, can we just like maybe reduce the pressure we put on ourselves of what the outcome has to be and just like be logical about what the true outcome actually needs to be. So I think that was the first step for me. And then the second step for me was just figuring out like, how do I make it so that this just is sustainable? Like it's not sustainable to hate my job every day and just feel so not confident and like show up to rooms and like again my nervous system being off and I just feel like I needed some little wins. Like I just was having like so many losses and losses and losses that I just needed some wins. And so I actually had a really good conversation with a mentor of mine who is this PM, quite senior PM. And he honestly just asked me, he was like, every single week, I need you to set a very, very tangible goal for yourself. And you're going to accomplish that goal every week. And when you do, I need you to really, really celebrate the fact that you accomplished them. And every single week, that goal is going to get a little bit harder and harder. So it's okay if the first week it is like something super silly, but you need to start hacking your confidence. And it was such a smart concept, but I again had to like really just rewire my brain. So, some weeks it was like, I want to write a PRD. It wasn't I want to write a good PRD. It wasn't, I want this PRD to be praised by every engineering manager that I send this to. It was like, I just want to complete the PRD. I don't want to get stuck in my like own emotions or lack of confidence. And for those of you listening who don't know what a PRD, it's like a product review document. And so I needed to just do that thing. And then the next week it could be like, okay, I want to write a PRD and like actually socialize this effectively, get the right inputs and do, you know what I mean? And more and more I could kind of build on that concept. What I would say is that all sounds really easy when you're maybe it sounds easy for me to say that, but like your day to day still has to happen, right? You still have to like go through that week where you wrote the PRD and it wasn't that good. And you have to like make yourself realize, well, the goal wasn't for it to be good. The goal was just for me to complete this. And again, like really positive self-talk. But I will say, like, as you get more senior and just generally as you kind of try to practice these micro wins, it does get hard, right? Like the stakes get higher. These micro wins can't be too micro. Otherwise, like you're just not going to be doing your job very well. So for me, I've had to kind of focus this idea of like, I want to have micro tangible wins that I can celebrate, but I always need to kind of make sure I have the right macro vision in mind so that these micro wins are going to be close to the macro vision. And externally, I am showing for myself that I am making improvements and making strides. And most great managers just want to see people that are showing the right behaviors and are improving week over week. And so I think that's like definitely helped me, not just in my own career as I've gotten more senior, but even for my team. Like there have been moments where, I've had people working for me and I kind of get a little bit, I get frustrated because I'm like, they're not where I need them to be. And rather than focusing on where I need them to be, I try to think about, well, like what could they do today? What could they do this week? What is the small micro win that'll help them gain their confidence back? And then also show and signal to me that they have the right behaviors. Because as long as I'm seeing that, we can coach them to the outcome. And so again, I think it's just like this idea of like zooming in on some micro wins, zooming out, having the longer term vision in mind to make sure you're at least moving in that right direction. And then yeah, I think it's just like really thinking about how you hack your confidence. Because at the end of the day, again, a lot of it is just the story you tell yourself.
Absolutely. Yes. And on the topic of hacking your confidence and strengths and weaknesses, you had shared this powerful story where you'd brought this laundry list of weaknesses to your leader to demonstrate your commitment to growth, which I find incredibly relatable. And you were gently coached and redirected to instead focus on your magic. Magic is my word of the year. So this is so special to me when I read it. Can you share how you went about focusing on your magic for the next 6 months, which again I love because it doesn't have to be so long term that you feel yourself quaking in your boots. And what are some tips for listeners to take stock of their magic right now and make a plan to amplify their magic over the next 6 months?
I love this question. I'm gonna work backwards. So for people that are trying to figure out how to find their magic, the playbook I would give you is look for people who see the magic in you. It's sounds really fluffy and it sounds hard, but like when you really ask yourself, like, who are the people in my life that see my magic? You'll know who those people are. And really just spend time with them. Ask them, like, what are my strengths? Get them to get concrete with you. And like unpack it almost like you are your own case study. Like really try to get very, very clear and crisp on what your strengths are. The second thing is a little bit of a repeat of what I said before, which is once you figure out what your strengths are, stop downplaying them. Just because they come naturally to you does not mean they come naturally to other people. And just because you're good at them and you maybe look around and see other people who are also good at them doesn't mean that you can't be even better at them and potentially be the best at them one day, right? Like no famous singer or famous actor started like maybe there are some that are like child actors, but like everyone has to start from a point of strength and work on that and get better and better and better, right? And so I think those are the first two steps, which is like look for the people that see the magic in you, audit your magic, really, really understand that, and then also get comfortable with your strengths. Don't downplay them. The third thing that I think is just a very real thing is it's okay to identify your weaknesses. And I almost think asking yourself to ignore your weaknesses is like not the easiest thing for a lot of people. Like I'm constantly thinking about ways I can improve. If I'm in a meeting, I'm like, oh, that didn't go as well. I wish I did this. I wish I did that. I think what I've had to do instead is actually ask myself how I work with my weaknesses in a more healthy way. So for example, a really big weakness of mine, just like at a more macro level, is that I compare myself a lot. I talked about being the youngest. I think that maybe goes into it. I always saw people older than me and kind of moving faster than me. I've always tried to like be the like put myself in rooms where like I'm the stupidest person in the room. So that means I'm surrounded by really, really smart people. But the downside of that is like I'm just constantly comparing myself to other people. And what happens is like when that goes unchecked, it can actually just spiral and it can create this like scarcity mindset. It can create like sometimes competitiveness. It can create this feeling that I'm not enough. And that's not good. That's not a good way to use that weakness. On the flip side, what I can say is like I'm actually very good at seeing other people's strengths. And when I'm comparing myself to other people, it's not that I only can look at it as like, oh, they are this and I'm not that. But I could look at it as like, they are this. They are really, really good at this thing. And so while I'm looking around comparing myself to other people, what if I just use that as like a tactic to see other people's strengths and be really, really good and observant at what other people are amazing at? And then how do I figure out, okay, they're really good at this thing. I'm really good at this thing. What are the ways that I can connect the dots and complement these things? And so really concretely, I use this example often, but like when I helped to start the Instacart business team, which is the team that I help to run right now, I was kind of in the process, we were in the process of building this awesome leadership team. And so, we're trying to run this new business. I'm trying to prove myself as like the leader of this team. We have all these amazing engineers and product leaders that are coming in that are so technical, and then, we hired externally some like amazing industry experts that understand supply chain better than anyone and the B2B kind of like marketplace space. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my God, like, what do I even bring to the table? Like, all these people are so much smarter than me. They have so much more experience. Like, how do I stand out in this leadership team? And what I really quickly realized was that, they were amazing at all those other things. But what I uniquely brought to the table is that, again, I was an excellent communicator. I understood how to get shit done at Instacart and do it well and do it in a way that builds trust and builds relationships with partners quickly. I'm really good at sales. Like I love picking up the phone and talking to customers. I'm good at taking feedback and making it very actionable because I came from a product management experience like background, despite it being short. And so rather than trying to be the most technical leader or like the most, proficient supply chain leader, I tried to really carve out a role for myself on my business leadership team that allowed me to really amplify my natural strengths while also shine a light on the things that other people are really, really good at. And so I think, that shift made all the difference. It was like I saw my magic, I got comfortable with my magic, and then instead of comparing my magic to other people, I looked around and saw their strengths and figured out how I could amplify their strengths.
That is so special. And I will be taking notes for my own playbook. So thank you so, so much.
Sure.
You were later hired as a chief of staff to the same leader at a different company, which you've spoken to. What have you learned about influencing without authority through these experiences, particularly in this new team you crafted?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think that coming to Instacart with a leader that I'd already worked for before was set me up for success in some ways, but then also I think made me work in other ways. So it set me up for success because I had a great track record with her, right? There was a reason that I came over with her. There was a reason that she brought me over, and it was because we had had a really good run together, and I had a track record of consistently performing under her leadership. Now, just because she had that trust in me doesn't mean her leadership team had that trust in me, or this new team at Instacart had this trust in me. So I couldn't rest on those kind of laurels, or I couldn't rest on like that past experience. I had to show up day one and do great work immediately and really recognize that I couldn't just like, not that I would ever be, but I couldn't just be lazy because I had proven myself in the past. I had to come in and kind of rebuild that track record of consistently performing with a new group of people. I think when I did that, it like kind of gave me my foot in the door with people where they're like, oh, okay, like if I work with Priya, like I know the work's going to get done well. And she's proven that. And, you kind of have to be patient in that period a little bit and not try too hard to like inauthentically or aggressively build trust with people. Like sometimes a little bit of that just takes a little bit of time to build that track record. And then I think, for me, I've always been a pretty big proponent of like build relationships before you need them. Like I just like people. I like surrounding myself with people. I like working with people that I actually like. And so, when I'm getting to know people early on, I just like really try to actually get to know them. I try to figure out who they are as humans, who they are outside of work. I try to like ask the right questions that can help them share a little bit more with me and also be vulnerable myself and share a lot and be generous with my own story and my own background. And what I found is that that mix of like consistently showing that I can do work and then having a lot of like a network of amazing relationships kind of helps you with that like influencing with a authority piece because you've created this like really good infrastructure for like people to work with you. I think the other pieces of influencing it without authority are really important, which is especially in chief of staff roles or especially as a leader, you're going to often have to ask people to do things. And you can just tell them what to do, or you can tell them why they need to do it. And I think that a lot of people and leaders sometimes, in like the flurry of all the things they have to get done, forget about the why. And so you're not one actually unleashing the most out of your people because you're kind of just prescribing what you need them to do. But I also think that it's not a good enough answer of like you need to do this because so and so said so. It's like, well, why is this important? Let's all get to that clarity of the goal we're trying to accomplish, and then we can even brainstorm what the what needs to be. And I think the last thing is just influencing without authority and also just being a good leader. I think generally means like helping others win, right? Like when they win, you win. And I think the chief of staff role is a really interesting one where it's like really behind the scenes, but it's also really at the forefront in some rooms. And your job is to not necessarily be the winner. Your job is to make other people win, enable the people around you. And there's like no better way on how to learn how to be a great leader of an organization than I think the chief of staff role in many ways, because you learn how to be a much better enabler of success than trying to like be successful on your own. And so I think for me, it's really like build the foundation with the track record, with the strong relationships, and then, actually influence that authority by sharing your why and then making sure that whatever you're doing is happening in a way that helps others thrive and helps others win versus just yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's being authentic and honoring your North Star and helping others succeed. So it's just like a win-win-win, which
Totally.
is wonderful.
Totally.
All right. So I'd love to jump into questions related to wellness. Through all of these adventures you've had, you moved to new countries, you made new friends, and you taught your body to wake up every morning at 5:45 a.m. because of at that time your 1.5 hour commute to work. How did all of this enable your high stakes new job? Or how did you approach all of this to enable your high stakes new job?
Yeah, it's a great question. First and foremost, I would say every time I think about that period of my life of like taking the 5:50 a.m. shuttle to Menlo Park and just like that whole journey, it feels like a blur. But I think that for me, I've always tried to think about what my constraints are and then what my non-negotiables are. And so the constraints for me in, moving to San Francisco to join Facebook was I had to commute. I had to like go really far to get to my office. And because of that, I was doing that in a really high stake job. So like I couldn't just show up to work at like 10 a.m. Not that like I think a lot of people can show up to work at 10 a.m., but like I didn't have a ton of flexibility in my schedule. A lot of my schedule involved attending a ton of meetings and just like being at the office for a structured period of time. And so that's a constraint. Now, then on the other hand, I have some like non-negotiables, which are like, I am a really social person and I wanted to live in the city and I felt like there was a bunch of things that would just make me happy. Maybe this is vain, but I also just like really like to like do my hair and do my makeup and feel good at work and not like show up in my sweatpants kind of thing. And when I feel good, I feel like I do good work. And so just to kind of use that as an example, I was like, okay, I know I need to take the earliest shuttle because that's the only one that gets me to work in time to like have breakfast and to like sit at my desk and do like the personal time I need at my desk to get ready for my day. Okay, so that means I'm just literally gonna wake up. I'm gonna roll out of bed. I'm gonna look like a crazy person on the shuttle. I'm gonna bring my hair tools and my makeup with me. I'm gonna do them mix on the shuttle, plus I'll do them at the office. And then I'll sit down at my desk and I'll like be in a position to succeed that day. And when I get home, the beauty of it all is that I'm like living in San Francisco. So if I do have a free evening, I've kind of created this system where like I live in a place where I can see my friends and I can socialize. And as much as like this is a lot to kind of handle all at once, if I kind of look at my constraints and then look at my non-negotiables, I've kind of figured out a way to make them all work together. And so I think like, that's definitely one piece that has also then helped me in my career, right? Like what are the actual constraints in our job or in our product or in like what we need to accomplish and achieve? And then what are some of the non-negotiables that we're going to try to layer onto those constraints? I think the other thing that I'm very vocal about, and I want to just be conscious of like this not coming across like wrong, but I have always kind of been of the mindset that I know I'm going to be successful in my future and I know I'm going to make a lot of money and making money is important to me. Like I will be honest with you on that. That's a goal of mine. What I think I've done a good job of is realizing like sometimes you have to like spend money to make money. And so I didn't try to always be a hero. Like I outsourced a lot of my life at the time that I was commuting at 5:45 a.m. every day. Whether that meant taking Uber some days or ordering my dinners or trying to get like people to help clean my apartment where I could. It's funny because like at the time I don't even think I really had the money to do those things. But I knew that if I took that burden off of myself, it would free up a lot more mental space for me to do better work. And I had to just trust that that would accelerate me and get me to a better place in the long term. And so I also kind of think about that in my day-to-day work as well. It's like, what things do I just not enjoy doing that I can outsource? Like, especially with AI tools now, it's sort of like, I don't need to do this thing. I can just outsource this thing and it frees up my time to do the deep thinking I need to do. And so, yeah, I think you just kind of have to like set yourself up for success with the right systems and the right tools.
No, I absolutely agree. And I was curious, are there any other systems that you leaned on?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one system that I think I subconsciously leaned on, but now I'm trying to more consciously do in my life, without putting too much pressure on myself, because I do think this can get out of control sometimes, but I really do like the concept of like habit stacking, especially when you're really, really clear on why you're doing the things. I'd almost not even call it like habit stacking. I would almost call like priority stacking. So, for example, I am someone that talking to my parents frequently throughout the week is really important to me. Taking my dog out for a walk, that's something that like is really important for my wellness. And I feel happier the mornings that I take her for a walk and don't outsource that to my husband. So, it's something as simple as like, okay, if I just make it so when I'm taking my dog for a walk, that is the time I call my parents, I'm now accomplishing two things that I love. I get to spend time with my dog, take her for the walk, get like the exercise that I know I want and need in the morning, get the sunlight, but then I'm also talking to my parents. And I come back and I like was able to accomplish two of my big priorities at the same time. And I try to think about that with work too, right? Like, um, there are times where I get to work on really interesting projects that really like spark my imagination and my creativity. And like a big priority for me right now is like continuing to push myself to be more strategic and to think about big bets and to think about big opportunities. And in doing that, I think another big priority for me is continuing to be, moving forward in my career and continuing to be ambitious with my career. And so when I get to work on these really big bets and I get to accomplish like, hopefully the outcome of the big bet is that it helps my career move forward. It's kind of like this nice priority stack where it just feels very aligned to the things I want at that moment and my priorities in general. And so yeah, it's really just asking myself like how can I fit more of the things I love to do and I really want to do in my day without feeling like I have to like choose between things.
Absolutely. Yeah. And being in that happy middle is such a priority to me. So thank you for speaking to that. I would now love to ask you about finding sponsors. And we've spoken about people who see the magic in us. What are a few micro goals that listeners can set in finding a sponsor who can leverage their network internally or externally to support them in their journey?
That's a great question. I will say that the answer to that is like almost more simple than I like want it to be, which is like most of my sponsors in my life have been my boss or my boss's peers. And I think that the theme is that these are people that have seen my work up close and personally. They feel like they have enough information about me to actually advocate for me. And often they're actually willing to put their reputation on the line for me because there's like some trust that they've seen in my actions and in my work. And so concretely, like what do people do with that information? I think it's just like you have to be really deliberate about who you work for. I always tell people when I feel like they ask me like, oh, where do I find a sponsor? I'm like, well, try to audit your current environment. Like, are you working for someone who you actually think is like a sponsor, even if they haven't said it to you? Are they showing signals that they are your sponsor? Do their peers get to see your work up close and personal? And have you invested in that relationship? But like, I think there's like a bigger question where sometimes I do think you have to ask yourself, am I even working in a place where sponsorship is possible, where leaders are good and know how to lift each other up or lift their teams up? So, I think that's the first thing. And generally, like I think part of finding leaders who are really good at that is like also asking other people, like, have you worked for someone who's been amazing? Like generally leaders who are very respected and very well connected, um, and people who are very generous with their influence, if they've done it once, they'll do it again. It's not like those types of people like only have a finite amount of energy to sponsor. It's usually like a trait of theirs. So I would ask around for the leaders that are naturally showing that and try to work for those types of leaders. Again, once you work for those leaders, I think you need to do good work. You need to not just do good work, but you need to be very conscious about how you position that work. You don't have to be annoying. You don't have to be shouting about it. You don't have to be inauthentic, but you do need to make sure that the right people see your impact. And I do think there's a lot of the times I see people who do amazing work, and it's like you're not advocating for yourself internally on this work. You didn't, a quick example is like I have people on my team that sometimes or people that I've worked with that will like go to an event, and after they'll tell me, oh, this event was really good. I got to speak here and I learned all these amazing insights. And it was just a really like eye-opening event. And I'm like, well, why wouldn't you post about that on Slack? It's helpful for the team to know, one, you represented us so well at this event, but also your insights are really helpful and we should be digging into them. And it's a really thoughtful way to like move the team forward. Why wouldn't you kind of share that? Um, and then the last thing I'd say is like, don't be afraid to kind of get to know your boss's boss or your boss's peers. Like I said, it might not be your boss that advocates for you, but often like in promotion rooms, your boss is not like sitting in that room alone by themselves. They're in a room with their peers and they're fighting for you over other people. And so the people around that table need to know your work firsthand and not just because your boss is advocating for you. So yeah, I think those are like three things like auditing your environment, doing great work in more visible ways, and then getting to know your boss's peers and getting to know kind of like that next senior layer above you is really helpful.
I love all of that. And again, we'll be re-listening and taking notes. So thank you so much.
Of course.
What is one piece of advice you have found yourself repeating to mentees from all of the various channels that you mentor across?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think my biggest piece of advice or like pushback that I find myself having in a lot of meetings I have, is just like spending just as much time on your North Star as you do on what your next job's going to be. Like, I often find people come to me and they're like, I'm really unsure of what I should do next. And we're trying to like workshop what their next move is. But I'm just like, I don't even know what door we should open if I don't know the destination or at least an idea of what the destination should be. And I often think of like careers like 0 to 1 products. Like 0 to 1 products are really hard because you might have a really, really big vision of where you want to go with this product, which is like why you're building it in the first place. And then you do need to kind of take some micro steps to gain more insights to learn about like which direction you're going to go down. And it is a bit of trial and error, but like no 0 to 1 product like really takes off unless you have that bold vision. And so often like PMs or founders start with that vision. They spend a lot of time on that vision. And so I always just try to get people to spend less time on like which is the what is like the individual door I need to go down to or open next, and really ask yourself, what is that North Star? What am I optimizing for? Where do I see myself in 5 to 10 years? How do I make sure that the next job I take is setting me up for that? And then are there certain jobs that can accelerate me 5 times faster towards that versus jobs that will still get me to that North Star, but might get me there slower? And I find it's really funny the number of people that still come to me and are like, I want to work in tech. And I'm just like, well, what does that mean? Like, that's not enough of a North Star. I think when you really start asking yourself what that means, it's like, do you love working in places that are innovating fast? Do you want to work at a place that has a culture that's more akin to a tech company versus a traditional banking or bank? Um, what do you like about the lifestyle that working at a company like this gets you? Just get like so concrete with what that future looks like. And I do think it makes the present decisions a lot clearer. It also just to add, like it makes it easier for people to help you. I find it so hard to help people answer that question when I just don't know where they're trying to go.
Yeah. And oftentimes, or at least for me, it's been almost the opposite problem of having that North Star. Well, it's been so encouraging speaking to you because I think like we have a very similar North Star. And so it's been so cool to see you um, make so many incredible strategic moves to hold that vision. And it's been so inspiring to try to figure out what that might mean for me. Um, and yeah, thank you so much for speaking to all of that because like for me it's breaking down the North Star into what it could mean now and feeling so young in these spaces, but knowing in my heart that I will always hold like my vision of my North Star in my back pocket. So even when I feel very small and tiny and not very smart in these rooms, because everyone is so much smarter, um, I can still hold that as an anchor. So thank
Oh, of
you so much for speaking to that.
course.
I would love to dive into the rapid fire questions. What does wellness mean to you today?
Today, wellness means physical, mental, and emotional health, not just one. And I think it also means really, really understanding what like filling up each of those cups actually means. I think like physical health used to mean an outcome to me, not a feeling. And now it's a feeling. And so I feel like I can fill that cup up so much easier, which is really cool.
What does leadership mean to you today?
I think leadership for me means being someone who has strong opinions and points of view, but holding them loosely and anchoring more in like principles and not ego. And I also think leadership means just like knowing how to harness people's strengths around you.
Is there anything else that you would like to share?
Oh, I feel like we got through so much. But I think maybe just like to end in the spirit of wellness and just like sustainability and like trying to have like a long, great career. I think something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is just this like idea of like hustle culture. And I think that especially lately, this idea of like hustle is like really frowned upon. And I think a big reason for that is it's like closely tied to burnout. There's like toxic productivity and this idea of like running yourself to the ground. But I don't think that that means you need to reject hustle altogether. Like my hustle is what got me here, like 100%. But I do feel like I've had to spend some time over the last few years redefining what hustle means. And I think like it means boundaries. It means knowing when to like push super hard and when I need to kind of like pause and be honest about what season I'm in. So I think like maybe the final thing to like end with is just like I don't think hustle's the problem. I think unsustainable hustle without purpose or without like recovery is the problem. So I think if you're really clear on your why and you're taking care of yourself along the way, hard work and hustle can actually feel really energizing. And it doesn't have to be depleting. So that's something that I'm thinking a lot about right now, but I thought it would be really relevant maybe for your audience as well.
Absolutely. Yes. And just connected so deeply to our values that make us so excited to show up for it all. So thank you so much for sharing that.
Of course, thank you. This is so fun.
Oh my gosh, thank you. I am so grateful that we had this conversation.